I'm hitting start now.
Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Mike Brady. I want to thank you guys for sitting in on this conversation. Get into this, but before I start, I just want to give a shout out and thanks to Colonel Dempsey and Major Trivedi for helping me and inviting me to come talk to you guys about flying and the Air Force, and hopefully we both learned something out of this. So without further ado, let's get started. Well, first, actually, I have to talk about real quick, lawyer, legalese. Anything I talk about today is the opinion of myself, or from myself. It's not representative of the Air Force or the Department of Defense, but really, this is a conversation between myself and you all about the Air Force flying, and hopefully I can answer some questions about moving forward, and if any of you are interested in flying, how to get there. So today's discussion, we'll talk about really my story, the pathway to get to earning your wings, and then some Q&A. Before we really dive into it, just some real quick rules of engagement. I have the chat open, and Major Trivedi is going to help me moderate this, so feel free to please at any time open up, ask any questions. I was just talking before the meeting started. I will use acronyms that I think are common knowledge, but to anyone else, it's a different language. So please, if you have any questions, throw out in the chat. Whatever you thought I said, ask, put a question mark there, and I'll try and get back to you. I have the chat open so I can help monitor that as well. So yeah, we'll talk about who I am, my story, get into Road to Wings and some questions and answers. But as any cool pilot conversation starts, you always have to start with a cool video. So here's of the 182nd Fighter Squadron, the squadron I'm attached to right now, learning to fly in Lockheed videos for the F-16. Let's see if this works. And I'm not showing that it's working. And yeah. So we'll press, imagine cool sounds, cool videos, cool pictures and videos of the F-16 flying. So who am I? I grew up just north of Chicago in the suburbs in Kenilworth, went to New Trier. I am a proud alumnus of Powawkee's Composite Squadron over at Chicago Executive Airport. I'll talk about Civil Air Patrol in just a second. And then I'm a proud graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, class of 2018, ZAMP. And I'm currently an active duty Air Force pilot, and I'm attached to the 149th Fighter Wing down here in Texas at Joint Base San Antonio, Kelly Field, learning to fly the F-16 in the basic course here. But besides the Air Force stuff, I love the outdoors, I love traveling. I have an awesome girlfriend who's getting a degree right now in public health, so she's real busy. I got a brother who's down there in the right-hand corner. He's a National Guardsman of the Illinois Guard, in the Army Guard, so I can talk to just a little bit of it, but I'm by no way an expert on a lot of things. Really, this is just a picture of people that are way smarter than I am that I like to surround myself with, but yeah. Joined Civil Air Patrol back in 2012, which seems like forever ago, but also yesterday. I was proud enough to get my Mitchell Award through Powawkee Composite Squadron. I was a cadet. If there was something Civil Air Patrol related in a volunteer program, I tried to volunteer for that, be it incentive flights or encampments or cadet programs, really. I found it as probably one of the most amazing experiences, and I attribute it to a lot of where I am today. I did NISA, and 2013 did their basic ground search and rescue course. Learned a lot, fun time running around Camp Atterbury, Indiana. I can't speak highly enough about it. It's a great program, and if you are into the ground search and rescue or aviation, it's a great program to really get some hands-on training outside of the squadron and meet a lot of new people from different squadrons across the states. I was a basic cadet attendee of the Great Lakes, or the Illinois encampment at Naval Station Great Lakes in 2013, and then when I was in 2014, I came back as a cadet staff member, which was an absolute blast. It was a great time. Sorry, catching up on the chat. The video didn't work, so we pressed. Moving forward, I was gracious enough to be accepted as a direct entry to the Air Force Academy, class of 2018. So I left the summer of 2014 to go off to Colorado Springs, where it was just, it was fun putting together this presentation, looking back and just feeling like this was, again, ages ago, but not really. 2014, I'll speak more about this later if you guys have questions about the academy. But 4-year military academy, for those that don't know, it's out in Colorado Springs, where the end goal is a commission in the United States Air Force as a second lieutenant, as well as getting, of course, a bachelor's of science. I graduated with a degree, a political science degree, a bachelor's of science, with a minor in French. But really, it was the adventures and the experiences along the ride that made that truly incredible. I spent all 4 years as a member of the Drum and Bugle Corps, where we are able to travel across the states. We'd load up on C-17s or KC-135s or C-130s and roll around and get to attend and perform and help support the football team wherever we went. And just getting hands-on experience and witnessing Guard units that would come over and help transport us and learn their missions, learn their stories was really the first interaction with the flying community in the Air Force. I didn't come from a military family. I was the first to join, and then my brother shortly thereafter. He joined in 2015 into the Army, enlisted in the Army. But I really was just trying to learn as much as I could, because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I first attended the academy. If you asked me back in 2013, 2014, absolutely flying was an interest of mine, but back then, when we didn't have the Space Force, I would have told you that I wanted to be a space launch officer. And here I am, probably pretty far from a space launch, but nonetheless, pretty pleased on how things ended up. And a lot of that has to do with the experiences. You'll see pictures over there up in the upper right-hand corner. That was a program done between sophomore and junior year that I was able to go over to the Middle East and witness the operations over there during Inherent Resolve. That's B-52 in the background. And it was pretty cool to see the ops tempo from not just the pilot perspective. We didn't get to ride along, obviously, in the buffs, but we were able to witness and see the maintenance side and the operations, and see the squadron, the mission planning, and see everything that goes into behind the scenes of putting a jet in the air and having it do its mission. So what helped me guide my thoughts on what I wanted to do in the Air Force and bring me really into the aviation realm, I had private flying experience through Powauke. Through Civil Air Patrol, I had the incentive rides, of course, and had friends that grew up wanting to get their private pilot's license, but I never really pursued that for various reasons. Mainly just trying to find the time and the financial backing to flying's expensive is what I'm trying to get at. But the Air Force obviously needed pilots, and what was probably one of the most premier experiences at the academy is the aviation programs. They are built into the academic course. They're built into the summer programs. Right here you have my first year, my senior year at the academy. That fall semester, the majority of the seniors at the academy will go through powered flight program, and that's for the pilots out there. The academy got a brand new fleet of SR-22s. They have governors in the engines, but still a fantastic, really comfortable plane to fly. And the program there is built to get first-class cadets that are interested in flying the opportunity to learn and get a real basic understanding of Air Force flying. And from there, you'll work with pilots from all across the Air Force that are there to teach. And this is your opportunity to get your first solo. And sure enough, it was just a pattern solo, but the feeling of taking an aircraft up by yourself after only about 8 hours is just incredible. It's really regimented training, and it goes down to just the core of what aviation training at the academy is like. You see in the bottom right is the picture of me freshman summer of the jump program, and that's known if you've done any research into the academy. It's the only one of the very few programs in the world, to my knowledge, the only one, where your first jump out of an aircraft is completely solo. It's a totally different way of like approaching training, but it really is a world of experiences and a great opportunity to look into pursuing an aviation career, working towards getting your Air Force wings. And that's what you see up in the up right. My friends, when we graduated and commissioned up there in Colorado Springs, it's almost weird looking now without seeing masks and everything, but it was a great opportunity. So I was awarded pilot trainee AFSC Air Force Specialty Code assignment. That's your senior year at the academy. You put into whatever job interests you, be it a rated field, so it's your pilots, your navigators, your remotely controlled aircraft, your RPA pilots, or air battle managers. You'll put in for your dream sheet, essentially, of what you would like to do in the Air Force. And at the same time, if that's not the career you want to pursue, you can put in for other jobs, intel, maintenance, missileer, or anything else you can imagine. The Air Force has probably a job for it. When I was awarded pilot training, I was awarded my first duty assignment, which is down at Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas. But it was a quick turnaround where you move all your stuff after you graduate, after a fun little adventure. Finally learning the ins and outs of how to move in the military, which is in itself a lengthy conversation. You are quick to turn back around, especially for the academy guys. You go back up to Colorado for your first introduction into Air Force flying, which is through a program, Introductory Flight Training. It's run through a contractor, DOS Aviation, down in Pueblo, but it's the first step towards getting the wings. DOS Aviation, like you get the opportunity to once again solo after about 12 hours in the program. Little bit dialed back from the nice Cirrus engines, but you get to take flight in the DA-20, a Diamond aircraft. It's really like a powered glider, but great flying experience just to once again kind of build confidence. And the structure of the training isn't necessarily, of course, built around the plane, but you get your first take into the ins and outs of the ground training, what really sets the Air Force apart and what the U.S. military sets apart from the world, and which is the incredible attention to detail, from everything from mission planning to briefing to knowing cold the emergency procedures of your aircraft. It's really just set in stone the standards going forward, and it pays off. It really does. So when you go into your next step, which is the undergrad pilot training, which is done at any of there's three main bases really. You have Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas, Columbus in Mississippi, and Vance in Oklahoma, as well as Shepherd for the advanced Euro-NATO joint jet pilot training. That's in Shepherd Air Force Base in North Texas. But as it stands right now, it's the primary pipeline entry for pilot training. For it, when I went through it, which is a crazy statement because they're already changing things. When I went through it, everyone starts off in simulators, academic classes, and then you roll into your first aircraft, which is the T-6A Texan II, and that's the picture up in the left-hand corner. It is an incredibly fun aircraft to fly. It is your first introduction into a high-performance, complex aircraft. You have a it's a turboprop. In relative speaking terms from the Air Force, it's a brand new jet. It's an incredibly fun aircraft to fly, and you work through the introductions on Air Force flying, basic fundamentals on instruments, navigation. You'll take the aircraft cross country. You will do all sorts of incredible, what seems leaps and bounds from IFT in the academy and the initial, getting your wings. It's truly a great experience when you first get your dollar right in the jet and you put the throttle forward and you get that feeling of thrust, and you suck your gear up. It's just an incredible experience in there. 5 months into that, 6 months into that, once you have completed the syllabus for the T6, you'll branch out into what the Air Force has a dual track system. Really, it's a 3-track system. You'll see on the bottom, that's the T-38, which is one of the tracks, the fighter bomber route, where you'll go on to an advanced specialized training, still undergrad, still before you get your wings. But for those that are selected, and it's a competitive process of getting to work towards either a fighter or bomber type aircraft or a mobility air refueling track, which is done to the T1 talent, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Work through about 5 months of that. You'll get your introductions into formation flying, to real intro level workings of energy management in the jet, which is something that it's crazy when you, just as you put the throttle forward on the in the T6, when you first light the afterburners in a jet, it's just an incredible feeling. But it's the best of 1960s technology with the T-38 right there. New avionics suite, though. I'll talk about that. And at the end of the day, it's about getting those wings. You'll get to put in your preferences regardless of what track you're on. And by the way, there's a 3rd track, which is helicopters. I don't know much about that. I only had one friend go to helicopters. But I can talk about that later. Get your wings. But anyway, get your wings, and you're ready to be farmed out to your next aircraft. Prior to getting your wings, about 2 weeks prior, or really 3 weeks, you'll get your drop night assignment. You'll put in your dream sheet. It's a great ceremony where you get to figure out what you're going to be flying. It's based on performance, your overall check ride scores, everything from what the Air Force needs to what you want to put through and what you want to fly. And that's where you get to, the video's not going to work for this, but, or maybe it will, yeah. This is one of the videos that worked, I guess. For those of you that have soloed, Air Force tradition, after your first solos, you get thrown into good old dunk tank. I'm shocked I didn't walk away with any random parasite or disease, judging by that tank wasn't cleaned for probably 20 years, but it's all, you get your first look into traditions. After getting assigned F-16s out of pilot training, the next step was right down the road, introduction to fighter fundamentals, an IFF course. And that's held at San Antonio and also Columbus Air Force Base and Shepherd Air Force Base. It is your first real introduction into a fighter squadron. You're still flying the T-38, but really you're trying to figure out what you can do with the aircraft in an air-to-air situation or an air-to-ground situation. It's the way of thinking about, how do I get into a position where I can employ a weapon? And it's introductory level, but it's leaps and bounds from undergrad pilot training, because you've shown that you have had your wings and you're ready to move to the next step. But sorry. But you start working towards new types of thinking about, how do I use the other aircraft in my flight lead? You're drilled into thinking that you're a wingman, and that's your job is to support flight lead, and it's also to make sure that you're backing up the whole flight itself. So you will work in 2-ship formations or 4-ship formations, and it's truly a blast. Then at some point you'll run off to Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington. You'll run around the woods for a little bit. You'll go to a happy little campsite and learn a couple things about surviving, resistance, evasion. I can't really talk too much about it, but it was a really wonderful time up in Spokane in the summer. I'm glad I didn't get to go in the winter like some of my buddies, but you learn there's a lot of cool stuff out in the Air Force, a lot of stuff that the Air Force has asset-wise that you didn't even know. And you're being taught by young airmen. If camping's your thing, I highly recommend looking into the SERE Specialist program. It's an incredible opportunity to work outdoors and have the Air Force pay for it. And of course, we get to the F-16, the free world's fighter jet. And that's where I am right now. The majority of my aviation career can be summed up going up and down the same highway for some reason in Texas. So I'm right down the road from where I did introductory fighter fundamentals and my undergrad pilot training, where I got my wings. And the Viper B course here is run by the Air National Guard, which is a unique opportunity to see the different side of the Air Force. For someone who's active duty, it's weird to see how you have the citizen soldier kind of concepts. I mean, it's a great opportunity, and what's great specifically about the instruction is a lot of the instructors from the Guard have served active duty, come over. So the average instructor has 1,500 hours in the F-16, where the average sim instructor who just got out of the Air Force has about 3,000 hours in the F-16. And all of them, from Top Gun instructors to weapons school instructors and attendees, it's every step you take in the flying progress or flying process into your next jet. It's an incredible feeling. And that's where I am today. I'm about 20 hours in the Viper right now, just getting into the thick of the air-to-air dogfighting, and it's an incredible experience, and it's fun to be in a good old Texan squadron with the Guard. As you can see, our flagship up in the corner. So really, here's a map of everywhere the Air Force has sent me. There's another map of where we can talk offline about where I managed to get the Air Force to pay for me, but you can see it just going from Illinois down to Colorado, up to Washington, Texas, and Wright-Patterson. I couldn't have imagined where I am now, sitting in your shoes as cadets years ago. And again, it seems like yesterday. And that's my story in a nutshell. I would like to talk about right now, really just getting into the depths of the process of getting your wings, the road to getting your wings, to get to basically where I am today. And before I even get into this, I just want to quickly say I'm no expert in a lot of things. I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but I would like to continue this opportunity, or push the opportunity to you guys, that if you have any questions on specifics, again, please feel free to throw in the chat. I have friends in all corners of the Air Force, flying, not flying. One of my best buddies, you can see that from the picture. I can go back and show you. One of them's a weather officer. Another one's getting her medical degree, all through the Air Force. So I'd be more than happy to help build the connections to see if any of you have questions moving forward to what maybe you'd like to do in the Air Force. That being said, this is tailored to those that want to become a pilot. Going through, you have the academy. Here are the first flying opportunities you'll probably get if you don't have any private flying experience on the side. The academy, there's a glider program, and there's powered flight. There's a jump program. All great opportunities to get that first initial taste of flying if you haven't done so. It's structured through summer programs or during the academic year. You can start, get a couple hours in it, and really try and see if this is what you might want to do with your career. Once you're picked up, talked about it already, the DA-20, it's about a 2-month program down in, Pueblo, Colorado. UPT with the T6 is about a 6-month program as it stands right now. I'll talk about the first high-performance complex aircraft experience with your first introduction to instruments, navigation, contact, and your first true solo. I was able to get 2 solos in the T6 before going on to 38s. The first being a transition solo where you went out to the area, you did a couple barrel rolls, scared yourself a little bit, and then you came back. And then after you get picked up for certain tracks, you get another solo where you do more barrel rolls and more loops, and you start to really say, I kind of like the G's like I did. But again, truly fun aircraft to fly. Talked about the dual track system that the Air Force has right now. T-38 is about a 5-month program as it stands for the fighter bombers, and over on the right-hand side you have the T-1, which starts building the crew concept of the aircraft. You're flying with another student and with an instructor. At no time is it students at the control, but it's a nice model Beechcraft Learjet kind of style flying, beach jet, sorry, where you get to practice and get real basic into flying like tankered routes or airdrop, do low levels in the jet. And from what I've been told from my friends, I've gone through that track. It's a great experience. The mornings are even earlier than T-38 flying, but it's a fun experience to go hop around the States in pilot training, get paid for by the Air Force. Forgot to mention this, but if you go 38s, got a little bit of a fun experience where you have to make a face that only your mother will approve of or love, which is the centrifuge up in Wright-Patterson. I forgot to talk about this. It's that crazy opportunity where the Air Force we start to realize how much money the Air Force is starting to put into you. They spin you around a couple times. You get to learn how, from a physiological standpoint, flying really affects you. And from the fighter community, it's being able to perform under stress, under Gs. That picture was a 7.5 Gs. Somewhere floating around my phone is the 9G profile we did before F-16s, but it's a great opportunity to again see other career fields in the Air Force. For here, we worked with the Aerospace Physiology, and this is done through the Air Force Institute of Technology up at Wright-Patterson, right across the street from where a bunch of officers are learning their advanced degree and stuff, where they get to show us how to handle Gs. And it's a weird experience, but it's interesting. From there, we talked about IFF. It's about a 2 to 3 month program as it stands right now. Introductory fighter fundamentals, your introduction to surface attack, weapons employment, and your first real fighter squadron. So you get to start seeing the traditions, some of the things where really in the Air Force, the saying goes, the briefing is sacred. It's one of the situations where you spend probably 2-3 hours briefing. The night before, you're probably really into the books, working right before a flight that lasts about 45-50 minutes. And then you spend 2-3 to 4 hours debriefing about it, everything. You're running into scrutinizing every little detail you can about it, and just all under the important idea that the mistakes you've made, you'll learn from, you won't make them again, but it's all to make sure that you're not hiding any secrets on things you need to work on, things you need to learn, and everyone walks out, no matter how experienced you are, with something new that they saw, and all under the intent to make yourself a better pilot. And then, of course, B course, the basic course. And for right now, F-16s, the C models, it's about a 5 to 8 months course. It depends on the airframe, and it depends on, of course, whether or not there's a global pandemic going on. It's a basic qualification on the airframe. You'll get checked out. You get your instrument qualifications on the aircraft, so you can fly by yourself into the equivalent of the civilian instrument rating, but solo on a high-performance aircraft. It's refining your fight setups. It's weapons employment and preparing yourself to go into the combat air force, the CAF. So for the cadets out there, really, as it stands, I know there's a bunch of talk about it. The key to getting your wings starts in getting your commissioning, getting to second lieutenant. And right now, there's 3 primary ways to get there. You have the academy, of course, my commissioning source. You have ROTC, which is done at just about every major institution out there. And then you have on the right-hand side, that's the officer training school. So if you do go enlisted, you'll still need to get an advanced, a basic degree, bachelor's. But there's opportunity for those that go enlisted to go over to the officer side through an 8-week program or 6-week program down at Maxwell Air Force Base in Georgia. For those of you that don't have your private pilot's license going into it, like myself, you'll go to IFT, we talked about, in Pueblo, Colorado, where you get your first Air Force style briefings and training. UPT right now, everyone starts off in the T6, and then you'll branch out. You'll go 38s, you'll go T1s, or you'll go the UH-1 for the helicopter route. And you'll get your wings. From there, if you're going the fighter bomber route with 38s, you'll go to IFF, and if you're not, you'll go to what they call a pilot introductory introductory qualifications. For the most part of the Air Force, it's done through either Altus Air Force Base in Oklahoma, if you're flying C-17s or 135s, or the soon-to-be KC-46, or you'll go C-5s down here in San Antonio, and you'll get your initial qualifications as a right seat co-pilot. And you'll see, I'll talk about in a second, where they'll be farmed out to their primary squadrons. From there, if you're the fighter bomber route, you'll go to your basic course, which there's all across the country, depending on the airframe you're going to. And those will last a various amount of hours, and you'll get all the same result, which is you are going to be a qualified wingman ready to go into the combat air force. be at the airframe you're going to. You won't stick around at your primary or at your basic course location. You'll go to an operational unit where they'll bring you into in-unit training, and there's all across the Air Force different locations depending on airframes, constantly standing up and standing down units. You'll get thrown into basically what your squadron is primarily focused on. For example, in the Viper community, one of the primary bases is Shaw Air Force Base, where there are multiple squadrons there that run different missions, is what I can talk about there, which will be a different mission set than the squadron at Aviano in Italy, or the ones that are the aggressors up at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. Same thing with F-15Cs out in the East and West Coast. They're primarily like air defense, or the Strike Eagles out in Seymour Johnson in South Carolina. North Carolina. And that's where you'll see same thing with your mobility aircrew. You don't have to go through a basic qualification course as long as the fighter community. So if you go mobility or tanker route, you're more than likely going to be farmed out and doing operational missions sooner than someone like myself, who's going through the fighter program. And that being said, I have friends that graduated in my same pilot training class that are already doing missions in the mobility and tanker fields, which is really cool to see them progress and see them actually start what we call hacking the mish, going out and flying the missions. So that all being said, for the cadets there that are listening, we are in a really interesting time when it comes to the production of pilots in the Air Force. I'm sure you guys have heard that there's a shortage across the board, being fighter or mobility, and it's fluctuating between anywhere between 1,000, 2,000. And before the pandemic, you were seeing that the world is facing a pilot shortage coming up. So it's forcing the Air Force to adapt. And the future pilot training, I can't really speak too much on it, but I was starting to see the initial steps moving into my pilot training. Programs like UPT Next or Pilot Training Next, where they're starting to incorporate and get away from the model of pilot training that it has been for decades now, and using technology to enhance chair flying. For any of the pilots out there, chair flying where you sit down, or for the non-pilots out there, chair flying is where you sit down at your dining room table or your office chair and you imagine what the cockpit looks like in the jet in front of you, and you run through and pretend and put your hand where you think the switches are. Now we're moving towards, if we can issue people, students running through the program, their own virtual reality sets, so they can physically or virtually see they can look around the cockpit, they can look around and see the traffic pattern before they even touch a jet. And they're starting to bring this online across the board. The T-38, as fun of a jet that is from the 60s. It's an old plane that is way beyond a life expectancy. And now we're seeing the introduction, and then over the next couple of years, any of the cadets listening will probably be some of the first to fly the new T-7A, the Red Hawk, which is Boeing's new advanced trainer. It's going to replace the T-38 and potentially the T-1 to shorten the pipeline training. And then, of course, you have Civil Air Patrol's role. And it's been in the news lately, seeing that they're trying to push for more flying. There are plenty of people in the conference this weekend that can speak way more about this. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to you guys. As the cadets, you're the next wave of pilots in an interesting aviation world. And getting that taste of flying early will help you down the road. It's the little things like just feeling the sense of flight. It might open up the world to you. So if you can, and I don't know how each squadron's handling with the COVID, the familiarization flights and starting to get a taste in just basic airmanship. I challenge you all to continue learning. Keep on working towards learning something new when it comes to flying. Something as simple as learning how to read aviation weather at the very least, and it'll help you down the road, especially when the Air Force is looking to cut back on training timelines and pipeline and produce pilots faster. As it stands right now, for myself, I'm 2 years out from graduating, or 2 years from graduating the academy. and I'm still in the training pipeline. They're trying to shorten the length of it so we can get pilots out into the career fields so we can deal with the retention bonus. And it's a real problem that not many have the perfect solution for. So that being said, I kind of want to open this up now to an opportunity for anyone, cadets, or anyone else listening on this. I want to give you the opportunity to talk to someone who's not a recruiter. I'm not getting any benefit for discussing what and how and pathways to becoming a pilot. What I wanted to do is talk to you and provide an opportunity, something that I wish I had a while back. Questions about how to get to the academy or what to do, or I don't even want to be a pilot, like what options in the Air Force. So with that being said, I want to open this up to the chat. If you have questions, feel free to talk, throw it your way, and I can speak to some of these topics and provide insight that I wish I had sitting in your shoes years ago.
So, Lieutenant Brady, this is Major Trivedi. Thank you, first of all, for taking time out and speak. And I see a number of questions here, so I'll try to gear more towards some of the questions coming from the cadets, if you could address. One of them is, what is the commitment to the Air Force after your acceptance at the USAFA, Air Force Academy? And second thing is, how difficult it was to get into the academy?
Great questions. The basic commitment out of the Air Force Academy is 5 years. So that means from your commissioning onward, it's 5 years that you owe active duty into the Air Force. From there, you can choose whether to stay in, go to the Guard, go to reserves, or continue as an active duty commitment. That being said, if you go to a rated career field, and that's going to be your pilots, your navigators, your air battle managers, or your RPA, your drone pilots, those are going to incur different commitments. For a pilot, for myself, it is a 10-year commitment, and that's from getting my wings. So when I was awarded wings in 2019, or earlier this year, 2020 still, the date that I received my wings is when that 10-year clock started. And that can change once you get approach your 10 years. You can go over to the Guard or the reserves to try and figure out your service, and it gets complicated, but the short answer is 5 years if you're not a rated air crew, and up to 10 years if you're a pilot, and that's your initial service commitment. The difficulty, going to the second question, is the difficulty getting into the academy really comes down to who you are as a well-rounded person. Academics are important, and I can't stress enough that I really feel for all of you out there that are having to do this blended online learning. I can't imagine the stress and the differences in the way to adapt. And it comes down to how can you make the most of the situation? Focus on your academics, focus on your volunteer commitments, and with Civil Air Patrol is an incredible opportunity. You're already getting a taste of what military style environments like. There's plenty of volunteer opportunities. I think that Civil Air Patrol is probably one of the most prime examples of an organization that's adapted to the COVID, as in seeing what assets do we have, which is a fleet of aircraft and capable pilots to move COVID vaccines, or COVID tests, I mean. That's something I've been seeing here in Texas with some of the wings here. But to answer your question, it comes down to stay hungry for knowledge, focus on your academics, but don't forget about making yourself a well-rounded person. You will have to get an endorsement from a member of Congress, either your representative, senator, or the president or vice president. And from there, it's making sure that they want to see the best opportunity of producing a capable officer of the utmost character.
So there's some of those you already addressed on the CAP related, and that's great. So I'm not going to repeat some of the questions, but one question, very interesting one, is, were you able to choose what airplane or airframe you flew, or did it depend upon your grades in the Air Force Academy?
At the Academy, the short answer is you don't get to choose what aircraft you get out of the academy. The competitive spot is for the pilot spot. When you graduate and commission out of the academy, you get a pilot slot, an allocation to go to pilot training. I graduated a class of 998, and I'm not 100% sure on this number. I know that there was roughly 500 of us that went to rated airfields. About 450 of that are pilots. So about 50 between drones, battle managers, and navigators. Don't quote me on that number, but that's where it stands right now. I can't speak to ROTC because that'll be dependent on the detachment. But once you get to your pilot training base, the first 6 months, you are just a pilot trainee. And all throughout pilot training is when you start selecting your track, starting to focus on formation flying if you're going to the fighter bomber route. And a lot of it's up to the instructors and your performance in check rides and your overall standing in your class. But sometimes things open up where if you want to go helicopters, usually that's a volunteer opportunity, and if you want it, you probably have it.
Follow-up on that question is, how do you choose or how is decided that airframe you will be training with? You showed the number of fighters in that picture from A-10 all the way to F-22. And so how did it become that you will be the F-16 Viper pilot?
Sure. So it depends on what the Air Force really needs, and that's at the end of the day, how many open pilot slots across the Air Force, for how many F-16s there are available, how many F-22s do we predict we need pilots for, and how many like C-17s and whatnot. With the current model of pilot training, if you're in the fighter bomber route, you're either going to go to an aircraft that has an F designator, or you're going to have a B designator, like a B-52 or B-1 out of pilot training. If you're flying the T-1, that can be anything from C-17, C-5, KC-135s, tankers, and all that. When you're in your track, be it 38s or T-1s, the mobilities of the fighters, or vice versa, I mean, when you approach your graduation date, there'll be a time and place when the big Air Force will send out, here are the slots that are available in the Air Force. For our class, we knew that there were a certain amount of fighter spots. We knew that there was a special operations slot. It's a little bit different in the fighter community because it was just rank all the aircraft in what you prefer, and that would go into a system where it's a lot of weird science behind the scenes, to be honest. But in short, you'll present the Air Force or your flight and the Air Force a list of things you'd like to fly in a ranked order on what you'd prefer. Your instructors and personnel will allocate based on your standing in the class those aircraft. So for me, example, the 38 class I went through, we had 4 F-16 spots, and one F-15E, one A-10, and one F-35. Then we had a special operations slot to a U-28, and then a B-52. And then we all kind of got together. We figured out, hey, what do people want? And it wasn't as competitive, like, oh, I want to take the F-35 spot, kind of deal. But at the end of the day, it's ranked on your merit, your ability to fly the aircraft. For the T1 side, for the mobility side, you'll put in the same thing, but they have the advantage of knowing exactly which aircraft and locations for that. My classmates over on the T1 side received a list from personnel that said there are 3 C-17s to Charleston and 2 to McCord Air Force Base. There's 1 KC-35 to X, Y, and Z, and they were able to do the same thing, present a list ranked on what they would like, but this one was more focused. And that's generally how the Air Force runs with it right now. There's some whispers on how they're trying to change it, but I can't truly speak to that.
Okay. And so now we have limited time, but I have 2 really good questions that I think I would like to actually ask by somebody here. Is what is the future of manned military flight in light of all this remote piloted aircraft in the battlefield?
It's a great question, and The real fun conversation is like, go grab a security clearance and we'll go into a vault and talk about it. But it's integration on what we can, or what assets we have and what the next asset is going to be. It's really weird thinking about the next war without fighting the current war, kind of like in that mentality. The F-16 is a fourth generation aircraft, and that's thinking like third generation being like the F4, second generation being the F-86 kind of situation, and the fifth generator being your F-35 and your F-22. So by that logic, the F-16 is old, it's outdated because there are fifth generation aircraft out there. The future of manned flight, from what I'm seeing and what I can talk about, is integration of what you have. The F-35 is a great example of what we're seeing as the next way of war. It's not so much, it is an incredibly capable aircraft that can do a lot of cool things. It's cool that it can talk to other jets. And that's kind of like the thing. We want to get aircraft talking to other things, like getting as much information as you can, fighting a smarter war by putting less people in harm's way, having access to drones and stuff, and specifics are all, it's hard to dance around, but it's manned is going to be there. It's just having more and more tools at your disposal is the best way I can describe it.
Right. And one last question. I think we're going to run out of time pretty soon. There's quite a few of those. You described the way you went into academy and got your pilot license, and now the serving an active duty officer. What about a 16-year-old who wants to fly fighters and currently working on his private pilot license? What kind of tips would you offer to this cadet?
Keep going. Keep learning the flying. At the end of the day, the private, and this is not trying to, this is trying to be the double-edged sword for this. Exposure to flying is going to help you in the long run. Do you need to have the private pilot's license? Not necessarily, but it will help. And it will help you get that initial feeling of what we call stick and rudder skills. Being able to look over somewhere and point the aircraft and being comfortable in situations, running emergency procedures and stuff. For the Air Force, flying is a lot different than civilian flying. A lot of our training is built on contingencies and emergency procedures and focusing on what can go wrong and how to adapt to it. So for the 16-year-old that's learning to fly, keep up with your well-rounded candidacy picture. Keep on volunteering, find a way that you can use your skills and start contributing. Fly in Civil Air Patrol if you can. That's a great way to keep going. That will help you in the long run for flying a mission-oriented style aircraft. And that might be what the exposure of, maybe you don't want to go fighters, maybe you want to go mobility. There's missions out there for every conceivable mission or aircraft, or conceivable mission for every aircraft out there, I should say.
Great. All right. I think the last one, slightly different, is what are the medical career options in the Air Force Academy? If you can shed some light, or, So
that's a good question.
And we have about 2 minutes, by the way.
Okay, cool. Long answer short. Everything from physicians to doctors to, or your standard, this is where my knowledge is pretty limited, but I do have one of my friends, I'll go back to that slide. She is currently out in, I think I just lost the screen. Let's see. Is out in Florida getting her, she's out in Florida getting her residency right now, going to become a doctor in the Air Force. There's dentists, there's dental assistants and everything. It's you become what they call a non-line officer. There are slots at the academy for it. I think ROTC can also do that, but this is what I'll close out with. Jay, I'm going to give you my email if you want to farm it out to the cadets. I'm not going to be the point of contact for medical stuff, but I would be more than happy to give you her contact, so you can. She'd be much more authority on that than I am. And same goes for drone pilots and everything. I have friends all across. One of those guys is a weather officer. So scroll back. Does that answer the
I
question?
have that email address that you and I have been communicating. So
Yeah.
cadets on this presentation, if you have any questions, I'm Major Jay Trivedi out of Milwaukee Squadron. Please reach out to me and I'll be happy to, connect you with Lieutenant Brady and he can guide you through.
Awesome.
With that, I would really like to thank you, Lieutenant Brady, and it is also an honor to see you from a cadet in our squadron growing into doing the great things and continue to look forward to hearing from you. He is on the Facebook, so after he stopped being a cadet, I did connect with him and I got to see his solo flights and the videos that he posts there, and it's a great honor to be able to see that our cadets soaring so high. Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
it,
you
Jay.
for your service.
Thank you, and again, it's an absolute honor to talk to you and here to be here. It's really cool, and I'm glad I can offer my little bit of wisdom to you all.
Great. Thank you, everyone. All right.